Okay, just imagine this for a second. The fastest cars on the planet, not weaving through the streets of Monaco or blasting down the Las Vegas Strip, but screaming through Queens, New York. Yeah, it's a wild idea that's been kicked around for decades, but a brand new proposal, one that's centered around a very famous ballpark, makes it feel more real than it ever has before.
So that's the big question, right? Could we actually see a Formula One car in all its glory, fly past the Unisphere, and race under the 7 train? This isn't just some fan's pipe dream anymore. A really detailed vision for how this could happen has been laid out, and honestly, it's absolutely insane.
You know, the idea of a race in Flushing Meadows Corona Park isn't new at all. It actually goes way back to the 1980s, but those plans just kind of fell apart. Politics, local opposition, you name it. But today, with F1's popularity just exploding, the focus is now on a very specific, and let's be real, very strategic spot, Citi Field, home of the Mets.
So what exactly is the vision here? Because it's way more ambitious than just, closing off a few streets for a weekend. The proposal really imagines this incredible, one-of-a-kind spectacle built entirely around one of New York's biggest sports hubs.
This would be what they call a hybrid circuit. So it's blending the raw speed you get on open park roads with the super tight, tricky confines of city streets. But the real headline grabber, the part that makes you go, wait, what? Is routing the track directly through Citi Field itself. Seriously, you add in some high-speed runs under the subway and past world-famous landmarks, and you have the recipe for an instant classic.
So how in the world do you actually design a world-class racetrack right in the middle of one of the densest urban areas on the planet? It's just an incredible puzzle of engineering, logistics, and a ton of creativity.
All right, this is the most innovative and, frankly, the wildest part of the plan. This whole stadium section idea is inspired by the Mexico City Grand Prix. Cars would literally enter through a gate in the outfield, drive a slow, really technical loop on the warning track or a specially prepared concourse, and then pop back out near third base. Now, for safety, it would have to be a low-speed section, but can you imagine the view for the 40,000 fans sitting inside? It would be absolutely breathtaking. And this just perfectly nails the genius of the idea. Just think about the TV shots. You'd have a drone shot from above showing a Ferrari snaking past the pitcher's mound, or an onboard camera with the huge scoreboard flashing in the background. It would create these unforgettable images and a fan experience that is just completely unlike anything else in all of motorsport. So let's look at the numbers. What would this track actually feel like to drive? Well, this potential layout creates a circuit that's almost 3 miles long, with top speeds hitting over 190 miles per hour. A lap time of around 1 minute and 35 seconds would put it right in the sweet spot for classic street circuits. And crucially, they've planned for 2 DRS zones, which are designed specifically to create those all-important overtaking opportunities.
Of course, New York wouldn't be going into this blind. Promoters can, and absolutely should, look at the successes and, maybe more importantly, the failures of other city races around the world to basically write their playbook.
And the most obvious comparison right now is Las Vegas. The good part? A huge economic injection for the city and a priceless amount of global attention. The bad part? Months of construction and road closures created traffic nightmares and really hurt some of the local businesses. The key lesson here is that a Queens race would have to learn from that and go out of its way to protect the small businesses in neighborhoods like Corona and Flushing.
And here is the reality check. During the race week in Las Vegas, foot traffic to local retail shops reportedly dropped by 23%. Why? Well, because all the street closures just made it too hard for regular people to get around. That's a real, tangible risk that any New York plan absolutely has to have an answer for. And you can learn even more by looking at other races. Miami proved that building a track around a stadium complex is a totally viable model. Monaco shows you the sheer scale of temporary stuff you need to build and just how critical it is to have the whole community on your side. And hey, even right here in New York, the Formula E races in Brooklyn showed that city agencies can coordinate a major motorsport event, just on a much smaller scale than Formula One.
So all of this leads us to the bottom line, right? Staging a Grand Prix is a monumental investment. It's basically a billion-dollar bet on a massive payoff. So let's actually look at the numbers.
The upfront costs are, well, they're staggering. As you can see, the biggest piece of the pie by far is the annual hosting fee you have to pay directly to Formula One, which could be almost half the total right there. Then you add in the cost of actually building the track, repaving roads, installing thousands of feet of barriers, grandstands, a temporary pit complex, and the total bill to just stage the very first race could easily climb towards $100 million.
So, how do you make all that money back? Well, the revenue really comes from 3 main places. First,
ticket sales. In a market like New York, you can bet those tickets would be premium, and that's tens of millions right there. Second, corporate sponsorship from all the huge finance and tech companies in the city would be massive. And finally, you have the enormous economic impact from tourism.
And to really get a sense of the scale here, just look at Las Vegas again. The projected economic impact for its very first race was an incredible $1.2 billion. I mean, to put that in perspective, a single weekend generated more economic activity than the entire yearly GDP of some small countries. F1 fans, they fly in from all over the world, they stay longer, and they spend way more than your average tourist. That is the kind of economic grand prize that New York would be chasing. So after weighing this spectacular vision against some truly monumental challenges, we come all the way back to our original question. Could this actually happen? What's the final verdict here?
The reality is, the road ahead is just full of hurdles. The logistics alone, managing traffic and crowds in Queens, would be a Herculean task. Winning over the local community, making sure that they actually benefit and don't just suffer through it, that's absolutely critical. Securing hundreds of millions of dollars in funding is a massive financial risk. And finally, just getting every single person, from the mayor's office to F1's governing body, to all agree on one plan, well, that might be the biggest challenge of them all.
Ultimately, this whole proposal forces us to ask a much bigger question. As our cities host more and more of these giant global mega events, how do we balance that desire for spectacle and economic boosts with the real needs of the local communities who actually call these places home? For a Queens Grand Prix, finding the answer to that question, well, that's going to be the final lap.